Okay, so in a minute I'll talk about the circular flow model. But before we do that, there's a useful model to keep in your head. You can't write it down as part of an answer, but it's a kind of good way of sensing, particularly at the start of macro, how things are going to work out. And that's the beer and glass model, which I may well have invented myself. I'm not entirely sure. So in what way is an economy like a glass of beer? Well, if we take you have to bear with my drawing skills here. If we take a glass, then what we can say is that the glass then it represents the potential of the economy. Yeah, so it represents the extent. Yeah, it represents our potential output, the potential GDP. Yeah, and in the end, we're going to kind of say this is sort of going to represent aggregate supply, and you'll see that later. Yeah, and it's sort of the economy's ability, to meet the level of demand. So that's our capacity. So then, I mean, all the best beer glasses obviously have beer in them. Yeah. So there's some beer. So the beer represents whether or not the capacity is being used. So effectively, so that's kind of the actual use of the economy. And that's in the end going to represent the level of demand in the economy. Aggregate, which as we said before, just means total aggregate demand. So this economy, how's it doing? Well, the answer is that not all of the potential is being used. This is an economy that has unemployed resources. So unemployment in the labour markets probably got if you wander down the high street, you probably see empty shops and so on and so forth. And kind of the air at the top of the glass is representing the economy's spare capacity. Looking at what we did in one of the other videos, we'd say this economy has a negative output gap. So what would we be recommending the government to do? Well, we'd say, well, we want to use our glass. We want to make better use of the potential. So therefore, if we look at the policies, if we look at monetary policy, we'd say, well, maybe the central bank could cut interest rates, making borrowing cheaper, encouraging people to go out and buy new cars, that type of stuff. The level of the glass would fill, and the economy would be close to potential. We'd reduce unemployment. Or in fiscal terms, the government could cut taxes or increase government spending, which would achieve the same result. So I think that's not a bad way of thinking about it. We could also imagine a glass where it's not a great one. There's our capacity. Imagine then, that the glass was completely full like that, and we'd say, well, we're probably quite happy with that. The economy's at its potential, but what do we want in the long run then? We might say, well, what's better than a pint of beer? You might say a litre of beer. So in this case, the focus for the government, if we're saying, well, what might we want to do? The focus might be trying to increase the size of glass, if we can. So our focus then is on potential economic growth. Whereas in the last glass, the half empty, half full one, our focus was on actual growth. So when the glass was half empty, we wanted actual growth to create jobs and so on. Here, we're saying, well, look, the economy's essentially working flat out, working at capacity. So how are we going to raise living standards further? We're going to need more capacity. So that's where the supply side policies come in. Maybe what we want to do is to increase our participation rate, get more people into the workforce. That would increase the size of the glass. Or maybe we want better education, so that with the same workforce, we've got higher productivity, higher skills, higher efficiency, which will again allow a greater level of output in the end. So finally, we might say, well, what about this glass? What about the glass where not only is it full, but actually, so we got a full glass, but actually, there's kind of beer all on the table. What we're saying here is that clearly there is more demand. Essentially, if the beer is representing demand in the economy, we've got massive excess demand. So not only have we got full employment, but essentially we've got if such a thing is possible, we have too much beer. In other words, there's too much demand in this economy. What we're saying is that our actual growth is greater than our potential. So, using the language that we used in one of the earlier videos, we have a positive output gap. And what does this represent? This represents demand that can't be met by our existing economy. So therefore, what's going to happen is when we've got excess demand, we're likely to see inflation rising, and also we're likely to see imports rising as well. So we're likely to see a worse trade deficit and higher levels of inflation. And then that's the idea that we talked about before again, that if demand is rising rapidly, one of the side effects if it's rising too fast is a risk of rising prices and a risk that you suck in imports and worsen your trade balance. We've all got lots of money, so we use it to buy new phones, new cars, all of which are made abroad. So in this case, the government might well say, well, I don't really like this very much, so therefore I'm going to I'm going to bring in the beer towel of doom, to mop up my beer. What would that represent? That would be represented by, say, what we might say tighter monetary policy. So we increase interest rates to deter people from borrowing, or we could also use tight fiscal policy. And tight just means reducing aggregate demand, whereas loose means increasing demand. Tight fiscal policy in which we increase taxes or decrease government spending. So when you're thinking about, particularly when you're thinking about economic growth, actual and potential, the beer and glass model is quite useful, and it also shows some of the links between growth and the other key policy objectives.